Welcome to the Michigan Golfer Show. Join us each week as we explore the people, the places, and the events that shape our great game.
We're in St. Louis at the Glen Country Club with Rob Stewart, and we're here really to recall the only Olympic golf event that was ever played in the United States, and it was here. Rob, you can tell us more about this story. It's really a fascinating one.
It is. Well, actually, last month would have been the 110-year anniversary of the Olympics being played here at Glen Echo. So we're pretty excited that it's coming back in 2016 at Rio. We've got a lot of things planned for 2016, but looking back to when this club was founded, it was founded with the idea of having a major golf tournament. They weren't thinking of the Olympics back in 1901, but the idea was to build this place to have a major international golf tournament, and I can get into the history of how we got the Olympics in a little bit here if you'd like.
Well, in 1904, the Olympics were in St. Louis, and so the founders of the club were George McGrew and Albert Lambert. And Lambert's a famous name around St. Louis, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, Colonel McGrew, when he decided to build this golf course, like I said, the intention was to build an 18-hole golf course that would host some big international event. Now, in 1903, I'm going to see if I can get this right. In 1903, Chicago was to have the Olympics, and St. Louis was going to have the World's Fair in 1904. Well, the colonel and the powers that be here in St. Louis thought, well, we need to somehow get the Olympics moved from Chicago to St. Louis and have it in conjunction with the World's Fair. So they tried as hard as they could to make that happen. It turns out that the way the Olympics got moved from Chicago to St. Louis was Teddy Roosevelt signed something that actually had them move the Olympics to St. Louis. So without that, we wouldn't have had both of those events. But you're right, Colonel McGrew and Albert Lambert were our founders. Albert Lambert, his family started Lambert Pharmaceuticals, and the airport over here is named after Albert, Lambert Field. But Lambert Pharmaceuticals became one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world. And the way they started, a little history on that, is during World War I, the Lamberts created a product, and they told the United States government, they said, well, there's this dreaded disease that's in the trenches over there in Europe, but we've got a product that'll fix it. And they said that disease is called halitosis, which they actually made that up. That was not true. But they said, we've got this product called Listerine, and if you put one of these in every one of our boys' backpack, they won't get that dreaded disease. Well, the government bought it. And that's how Lambert Pharmaceuticals became big and powerful over that little bitty thing. So, and we still use it today, so thank God for them. But
I'll think about that the next time I use Listerine. That's really amazing.
Saved World War I for us right there, you know.
And I didn't know about the move from Chicago to St. Louis. That in itself is pretty fascinating. But the course itself was just growing in, and there weren't any trees there.
There were not many trees, that's correct. The golf course was almost link style. Now it's completely tree-lined and pretty heavy. But no, you're right. Back then, the Fallis brothers were from Scotland. They were the designers of the golf course. And actually one of them became the head pro for a long time. But they were taught under old Tom Morris at St. Andrews. So I think they brought a lot of that history to this golf course itself.
Well, the course itself is still pretty hilly. And several things around the club are actually named for things that happened during that match. The U.S. didn't win that match, but George Lyon, who actually won the match, his name is still around here.
Well, this is true. George Lyon was the winner. It's interesting. I'll give you a little bit of history about the Olympic Games of golf that were held here. So back in 1904, the Olympic Games were not just one golf match. It wasn't just one match play event. There were multiple events. There was a putting contest. There was a driving contest. There were team events. This went on and on and on. The other interesting thing is that the trophies and whatnot, the medals that were presented. And first of all, this was the first and only time that golf was a medaled sport in the Olympics, again now until it comes back in 2016. But all of those different events took a long time to complete. And the club itself, there really was no IOC back then either. So Glen Echo was the ones that kind of made the golf thing happen. So the club raised $60,000 back in, I guess, 1903 to kind of do some additions to the golf course, but also put together a booklet, which I have, I could show you, that was sent all around the world to clubs around the world to get participants to come here to St. Louis and play. Again, there was no IOC, there was no committee that was trying to get players. It was pretty much all on the club's shoulders to do it. Again, all the trophies, all the medals, that was all commissioned by the club, all done by a local jeweler here in town, which is still here. But getting back to George Lyon, the match was almost determined on the 15th hole. Now, we call it Egan's Lake because Chandler Egan is the gentleman that lost to George Lyon. He hit it in the water there, which so many of us have. And then they went on to 16, and George Lyon hit a good drive and everything else. But that kind of goes back to another story. George Lyon had just took up golf not that many years before the Olympics were here. Chandler was well known in the golfing world, you know, hits the ball a long way and everything else, and was a lot younger than George Lyon. But during the Olympics, George Lyon kept it up with him on his drives. He was a lot straighter. But everybody had wrote him off from the beginning, that there's no way George Lyon can beat this younger Chandler Egan, who's so accomplished. So the evening of the awards presentation, not in this building, but the original clubhouse here, they present the awards. George Lyon gets called up to receive his medal. And this is a true story. He walks on his hands from his seat to the stand to collect his medal, just to kind of prove to everybody that you can be older, but you still got it. But yes, we've got his likeness throughout the place. I had George Lyon's great-grandson here earlier this year. And we talked about history and everything else. And the interesting thing is the gold medal that George Lyon was awarded was lost. And nobody knew really where it was. And I asked his great-grandson, you know, well, what do you know about it? He says the family thinks that during the Great Depression, someone pawned that off, and they think it got melted down, which is just awful, because I can't even imagine what that would be worth if they could find it.
But you have a replica here.
We do. We actually have a replica right behind you, and then we also use a replica of the gold medal as our members' bag tags.
Bag tags? Wow.
Which I'll give you one, by the way.
Oh, that's really cool, too. But so the matches went on for a long time, and George Lyon is from Toronto, so the Canadians still claim that they are the defending champions.
That is correct. An interesting thing, so in 2004, we celebrated the centennial of the Olympics, and as a club, we invited every club around the world that would have been able to participate in 1904. We had some clubs from Scotland. The club from France didn't come, but we did have a few clubs from Canada, one of which was George Lyon's club, Rosedale and Lambton. And so then what we did every year after that, since 2004, we've kind of had a Ryder Cup competition with those clubs up there in Canada, just to keep the history going here, you know, with the Olympics. Now, Rosedale dropped out a few years ago, but we still continue it with Lambton, which has got a lot of history of its own. If you're ever up there, I encourage you to go. But so the Canadians might have won the Olympics, but we have a cup here, which we could show you, for our tournament that we have every year with the club up there. And Glen Echo, I think, has won every year, but maybe once. So they might have won the gold medal, but Glen Echo wins every year when it's competing against Lambton. So.
Well, keeping that tradition alive is a pretty cool thing to be able to do. And one of the other interesting bits of history about the club is it's the oldest 18-hole course west of the Mississippi. How about that?
That is right. They didn't build too many 18-hole golf courses from the start back then. But talking about the history, so the club opened in 1901, and where we're at now is basically part of St. Louis City. It's pretty close to downtown. But back then, this was the country. This was pretty far out. The family that owned the land actually had a farm in downtown St. Louis right by the Gateway Arch, but they also had this farm. And when the colonel was looking for a spot for a golf course, he found this particular property and thought that would be perfect. Struck up a deal with the people that owned it. We used their clubhouse as the original clubhouse, or their home as the original clubhouse for a matter of time. But back then in 1901, to get here, all these people lived in the city. You either came by horse and buggy or by train. And the train tracks that the members use to get here are still there today, and they're part of our mass transit system, the Metrolink. So when that train goes by, you still got that piece of history right there, which is pretty neat.
That is pretty neat. And one of the other things that's pretty neat is this beautiful clubhouse. It wasn't around in 1904, but tell us a little bit about it and how it replaced the clubhouse that was around in 1904.
Yeah, we do have a beautiful building here that opened in 1927. It was built or designed architecturally wise by the same gentleman that built the Chase Park Plaza here in St. Louis. You know, the original clubhouse, which was beautiful, was an old Victorian style building, wood. And I think what happened was it just got to the point, you know, better electricity, better plumbing. It was cheaper just to tear that old building down and start over and build this one. Now the rumor, and this is kind of a rumor that every old club has got, was that the old clubhouse burnt down and they built a new one because of that, which was not true. Again, it was just cheaper to do the other. And I've got a picture throughout the building somewhere on a hallway that shows this building being built and the old clubhouse still intact behind it. Now, I will tell you another thing, that a lot of old clubs claim that their clubhouses are haunted. Well, they said that about us too, and I've been here 17 years and I've never seen a ghost. But we did have a ghost hunter come out, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago or so. And we were talking about the internet earlier. This was kind of before the internet really got hopping. So she took a tour through this particular building, and she would sense things, you know, different places and tell us all this kind of stuff. But she said, I really get a strong sense over by the tennis courts, which was where the original clubhouse was built. Now, you know, maybe she did her research and figured that out beforehand. But I do have people here, members, that say they've seen ghosts throughout the building. Now, again, I've never seen it, but just another neat story to have at an old club.
I never even heard of a ghost hunter, but that's pretty cool. What, has she ever found any?
Well, that's arguable. I don't think so, but, you know.
They're always good stories.
That's right.
So this course is just absolutely beautiful. It's October, and it's still very green, and it looks to me like it's a course that's really good for shot makers. Can you tell us a little bit about the course itself?
Well, that's true. It's a tight golf course. It's not very long. The greens have got much more break than you can see in them, and they're usually really fast. But the neat thing is that the golf course layout itself, I would say 12, 13 of the holes that are out there are pretty much just like they were in 1904 when the Olympics were played. So the members and their guests, you know, it's pretty rare that you could say you can play an Olympic venue on a regular basis, and you can here. That's one of our things that we kind of claim to fame is, supposedly, we are the oldest continuously operated Olympic venue in the world. That's the same operation, you know, it hasn't changed hands or whatever. But the golf course is tough. Everybody, you look at the scorecard and you think, well, that should be pretty easy because it's so short, but I assure you it's not. You've got side hill lies, uphill lies, downhill lies. It's you got to remember back in 1901, there was no machinery, earth-moving equipment, so they kind of just used the lay of the land, and that makes it pretty tough.
You mentioned earlier something that Pete Dye said when he was visiting.
That's right. Pete Dye was out here and played golf some number of years ago, but he said, you know, don't change a thing. He said, they wouldn't let me build a golf course like this anymore. To have somebody like, I'm talking about Pete Dye Sr., to come out here and say, I wouldn't change a thing is a pretty good testimony to the greatness of this golf course, I believe.
Well, it certainly is. And I want to also ask you about something we mentioned earlier, and that is, what's your favorite hole?
Well, I'm biased. I said number 4 would be my favorite hole. It's a par 5 that I actually had a 2 on. I was playing with an older gentleman that runs our bag room on a Monday when we were closed, and I don't hit the ball very far, so it was in the fall. The ground was pretty hard, but I hit a good drive, hit a good 3-wood. Didn't really pay attention to it because I never get on that green in 2. We had a maintenance man that was up there working the sand traps, and he yelled something back, and I didn't pay any attention to Skip. But we get up there to the green, and I'm looking for my ball, and I say to Tom, you know where it is? And he goes, I don't know, maybe it's behind the green, whatever. And he says jokingly, he says, you should look in the hole. There it was, right there in the hole. So a 2 on a par 5 for me is pretty good. Now, I'll tell you, it's kind of weird because the rarity of a double eagle, I don't forget what the statistics are, but it's super rare. Well, so I get a double eagle on that hole. A week later, the next hole is a par 4. It's a short par 4, but we had a college team out here. Again, a week later, that one of the college kids knocks it in for a double eagle, hits his drive into the hole on a par 4 for a double eagle. That's kind of weird. And then within the next 30 days, one of my members' sons gets a double eagle on the same hole that I got mine on. So 3 in the course of, 60 days on the same golf course is pretty strange. So there's a lot of good luck around here. There's a par 3 out there, number 6. About 10 years ago, we had a foursome. The first member gets up. It's about 176 yards. He gets up, knocks it in the hole for a hole in one. The very next guy in his foursome gets up, puts it on top of his ball. So there's a reason to join right there. You're bound and determined to have a good luck out here.
Sounds to me like you have a good luck ghost out there.
Well, there you go. Maybe she was right. We got friendly ghosts, not bad ones. But
Well, Rob, the Olympics are coming up in a couple of years, and golf is returning. Do you have some plans around that?
we do. We've got a lot of things in the works. The club itself, we're working with the St. Louis Sports Commission, which is a pretty big organization that gets things done here in St. Louis. If the NAACA or the tournaments at Belle Reve, they're the guys that kind of make that stuff happen. So what we're hoping to do in 2016 is have kind of like a weekend-long event. Honestly, the goal, I'm not sure we'll be able to get it done, but what we really want to do is have an exhibition match between either an American touring pro and a Canadian touring pro, or an American amateur and a Canadian amateur, like maybe the champions, and have them kind of recreate the match here at the club. So ideally, what I would like to have them do is have them dress in period clothes, use hickory shafted clubs, use a gutta percha ball. And I've talked to the Golf Channel. They seem a little bit interested in airing that on TV. I think that would be pretty neat. In 2016, when golf comes back, we're going to be looking at the history of golf and having it here in St. Louis. And I think audiences would love to see that recreated, on TV. Plus, you see these guys on the tour now hit their drives 320 yards. Let's see how far they'll hit it with a wooden shafted club and a ball that's made out of feathers. But so that's one of the things we're going to do. Gil Hance, who is the designer down there in Rio, we've been in contact with him. He does want to incorporate something with Glen Echo in the design of that golf course. It's been kind of a mess getting that thing built. What we are going to do is hopefully create a time capsule and bring it down there and bury it on the golf course. And we do have a huge replica of the gold medal that was given out to George Lyon. We plan on doing another one of those, taking it down to the club in Rio, presenting it to them, to have that kind of relationship that we have with Toronto's clubs, to keep it going.
Well, that sounds really cool, and with those antique clubs and antique balls, maybe they can break the course record that George Lyon set of 77.
I would hope so, yeah. I would hope so. Although, in 2004, when we celebrated our 100th anniversary of the Olympics, that's what we did. We had a golf tournament with all the members dressed in period clothes. There are companies that go around the country, I don't know how many, but that just do that. They rent, the hickory shafted clubs and the apparel and the knickers and everything. I mean, all of our ladies dressed in full gowns, which is what they would have done, back in 1904. So it can be done, and I played, and I can tell you it's pretty hard. I'm not sure if anybody would break par, to be honest with you, but it's a different game. But I think television-wise, I think people would love to see that connection. And who knows, maybe this time an American could beat the Canadian. We'll see.
Well, I certainly look forward to playing this course sometime. It's just stunning, and it's just been wonderful to talk with you. Thank you so much.
We're so pleased you guys came. We're happy to have you.